On behalf of the President and the people of Ghana, I wish to thank the UN ECOSOC for the opportunity to participate in the 2019 Voluntary National Review process and to share Ghana's experiences in the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Our implementation of the SDGs is grounded in the message of the President, and I quote, said, "For us as a country, the SDGs are indispensable. We have a moral duty and obligation to bequeath a more prosperous and a more secure world to future generations," end of quote. His Excellency congratulates all countries that are sharing their VNR at this year's high-level political forum and wishes them well. Madam President, Ghana's institutional arrangement for implementing the 2030 Agenda involves all stakeholders. These include the executive, the legislature, the judiciary, the private sector, CSOs, traditional authorities, faith-based organizations, the youth, and the media. The arrangement has resulted in strong and active partnership outcomes, among which are a CSO platform on SDGs, the CEO advisory group on SDGs, a media platform, a royal dialogue, and an annual youth summit. The coordination of the arrangement is at 3 levels. At the apex, the high-level ministerial committee comprising 15 ministers of state and chaired by the Minister for Planning on behalf of His Excellency the President. At the second level is the SDGs Implementation Coordination Committee, which comprises representatives of key government agencies, the Office of the President, civil society organizations, and the Governing Council of the National Africa Peer Review Mechanism. The third level is a technical committee comprising SDGs focal persons for all ministries, departments, and agencies of government, as well as representatives from CSOs, private sector, academia, and think tanks. They provide technical support on implementation, on tracking and performance, on advocacy and awareness creation, and public education. The UN Country Office in Ghana holds observer status on both the high-level ministerial committee and the Implementation Coordination Committee. Madam President, the Coordinated Program of Economic and Social Development Policies is the development blueprint for the country and forms the basis for sector and district development plans. The coordinated program is designed to be responsive to the SDGs. The Ministry of Finance budget codes are mapped to the SDG targets and has further developed a tracking tool to enable it to monitor allocations and expenditure on each SDG target. Embedded in the coordinated program are 16 flagship initiatives to address critical development issues as well as drive the attainment of the SDGs. The initiatives also support the long-term vision of Ghana as a Ghana Beyond Aid, which is anchored on structural economic transformation, economic and social inclusion, environmental sustainability, transparency, and accountability. The design of the flagship initiatives such as Digitizing Ghana, Free Senior High School, Planting for Food and Jobs, One District, One Factory, and the Infrastructure for Poverty Eradication Program took into account the linkages among the SDGs, the dimensions of sustainable development, and the synergies among initiatives. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, Ghana had made significant progress on many of the SDG targets. Overall poverty has declined from 24.2% in 2013 to 23.4% in 2017. On the economic front, growth in GDP remains robust, accelerating to 8.1% in 2017, thus making Ghana the second fastest growing economy in Africa that year. Key macroeconomic indicators, including budget deficit, inflation, and interest rates, are all trending downwards. And for the first time in over a decade, trade balance recorded surpluses in 2017 and 2018, leading to improved balance of payment position. Focusing on the social sector, access to education and completion rates, especially at the senior high school level, has generally improved. This is due to the introduction of the government's Free Senior High School flagship initiative. Gender parity has also been achieved at basic level. The Free Senior High School policy initiative, which aligns with SDG 4.1, was introduced in 2017. Some of the objectives of the policy include distribution of core textbooks to ensure quality educational outcomes, expansion in school infrastructure, implementation of an equity policy to ensure that 30% of students from public junior high schools have access to the top 55 senior high schools in the country, and realigning and revamping of the TVET institutions for effective coordination. The policy eliminates the cost barrier to education and bridges the disparity in enrollment levels between urban and rural households. It has also increased opportunities for skills training and development through the inclusion of technical and vocational schools. In 2017-2018 academic year, for instance, 90,000 additional students gained admission into the senior high school who will otherwise not have gone to high school. This increased to 181,000 in 2018-2019. With regard to access to energy, the proportion of population with access to electricity has improved from 70.6% in 2013 to 81.1% in 2017. In addition, the usage of electricity or LPG for cooking has also increased. Government is making a conscious effort to ensure universal access to electricity by the year 2030 and is deploying off-grid and mini-grid solutions to meet the electricity needs of remote and hard-to-reach communities. With regards to the environment, there has been a marginal increase in our forest cover. Ghana has commenced the implementation of the forest plantation strategy with the aim to protect our forest cover and achieve sustainable supply of planted forest goods and services. The program has employed over 45,000 young people between 2017 and 2018. This strategy will contribute significantly to achieving Ghana's commitment under the Paris Agreement. On the governance front, the Office of the Special Prosecutor has been set up to accelerate investigation and prosecution of public officials, politically exposed persons, and private organizations implicated. For Ghana, the implementation of the SDGs has highlighted several important lessons, including developing strategic partnerships with key stakeholders, which is very essential, building strong linkages among government, research institutions, academia, private sector, and other stakeholders for research and innovation, enhancing the capacity of subnational structures for effective implementation of the SDGs, mobilizing adequate domestic resources to sustain and expand current interventions, and strengthening the capacity to generate and use administrative data for monitoring outcomes. Madam President, I would now like to invite our partners from the civil society platform to share their insight. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for the opportunity on behalf of Ghana CSO platform on SDGs. The Ghana CSO platform on SDGs has put together this shadow report titled Telling the Ghanaian Story Through the Lens of Citizens. Drawing inspiration from paragraph 79 of the Agenda 2030 Declaration, our shadow report complements government's VNR report as submitted. The report highlights a few key findings that I wish to bring to the fore. Firstly, with the membership of 372 CSOs, the platform is serving as an avenue for engagement and collaboration amongst CSOs, government, and the private sector. Secondly, CSOs are making a significant contribution to the implementation of the SDGs at all levels, particularly in the area of awareness creation and capacity building of local NGOs and citizens to monitor progress of implementation. Additionally, Ghana has adopted an all-inclusive and multi-stakeholder partnership approach backed by sound institutional arrangement and high-level political support that identifies CSOs as key implementing partners. Furthermore, the emerging culture of collaboration between government and CSOs has gone a large way to reduce the high level of mistrust and suspicion between government and CSOs, which is deemed now as a good practice that enhances implementation. Having given these, I would go on to propose what should be the way forward so far as our report is concerned. Together with government, we intend to increase or improve awareness of citizens on the SDGs so as to ensure that citizens engender behavioral change. Additionally, coordination at the sub-national level would be improved as is at the national level. Furthermore, in view of the fact that CSOs collect data for monitoring, the implementation of the SDGs can only be enhanced if CSO collects data effectively and efficiently. Finally, the capacity of all stakeholders ought to be improved and enhanced so as to operationalize the key principles of the SDGs. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. In conclusion, Madam President, sustained financing is critical for the realization of the SDGs. Beyond alignment with the national budget, the financing gap requires improving domestic resource mobilization and leveraging available resources from the private sector for accelerated implementation of priority interventions. To address the current data challenges, Ghana is implementing a data roadmap with 3 priority areas for action, namely filling data gaps, encouraging data use, strengthening the data ecosystems. Madam President, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I thank you all for your attention.
I thank His Excellency, the Minister of Planning of Ghana, for the presentation. I now invite delegations to have an interactive dialogue with the presenting country. Before I give the floor to the first speaker, I would like to again appeal to delegations to observe the time limit of 2 minutes each for the intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished Minister of Research and Higher Education of Norway.
Thank you. Norway acknowledges Ghana for the VNR. We are impressed by the transparency of your voluntary national review. It offers good insight into the challenges and opportunities facing the nation and how the government plans to navigate to bring prosperity to its citizens. The partnership between Norway and Ghana at the highest political level on the global implementation of the 2030 Agenda is a partnership we value very highly. Respect and mutual learning characterize this partnership. As one of the first countries, your government has managed to align the national budget to the SDGs. We commend you for that achievement. The conducive environment for investments has encouraged foreign investments in Ghana, also from Norway. We believe that these investments can offer significant contributions to economic growth and welfare for your country. The implementation of the 2030 Agenda will only succeed if implementation of the SDGs triggers productivity and job creation. What opportunity do you see the SDGs offer today at grassroots level in Ghana? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished Minister from Norway for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Germany.
Thank you very much for your inspiring presentation. It is a great learning opportunity to hear from Ghana's commitment and advances in the 2030 Agenda, considering your multiple success stories as a thriving economy and a stable democracy. We also highly appreciate your present global leadership as a co-chair of the United Nations Secretary-General's eminent group of SDG advocates. There are 2 key concerns from your VNR, which we found particularly relevant for other countries' processes. One relates to your outstanding commitment to putting the Leave No One Behind principle, one of the key promises of the 2030 Agenda, in practice by targeting vulnerable groups through improved planning and programming, while also adjusting statistical systems and involving these groups into structured consultations, as we have also seen today by involving civil society in your presentation. We really appreciate that, and congratulations to that. Given the paramount imperative to address the needs and opportunities of those groups, what are the current initiatives geared towards improving the availability of disaggregated data? And what are the main caveats in terms of statistical capacity? The second element we found particularly interesting relates to Ghana's ambition to finance the SDGs through a balanced mix of domestic and private resources, while reducing dependency on ODA. We are impressed by Ghana's improvements with regard to domestic resource mobilization, particularly by local governments. Could you share more details on how you have been able to achieve these improvements and how Ghana aims to further improve tax revenues? Once again, thank you very much for your inspiring and insightful VNR.
I thank the distinguished representative of Germany for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cameroon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for giving me the floor. Honorable Minister of Planning of Ghana and the delegation coming from Ghana, let me start by commending your brilliant and enriching presentation in which you shared Ghana's experience in the implementation of the SDGs. Of course, we have realized aligning with the 2030 agenda, where it appears that the central message of yours is that the SDGs should not leave somebody behind. I just want you to tell us more about what Ghana is doing to eliminate gender disparities in education and ensure equal access for all in terms of education. I thank you for your response.
I thank the distinguished representative of Cameroon for his intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We would like to congratulate Ghana on your voluntary national review and thank you for the report and the presentation made. We commend the government for its efforts to involve a wide range of stakeholders in its voluntary national review process, including civil society, the private sector, academia, and youth. On that note, we would like to ask you whether you could share with us some key lessons learned from your efforts to ensure an inclusive and multi-stakeholder approach in your voluntary national review process. Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of Denmark for her intervention. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Women's Major Group.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Distinguished Minister, we acknowledge the structures put in place by Ghana government for implementing, monitoring, and reporting on the SDG commitment as an indicator of its political commitment. We laud the government for putting in place policy frameworks and systems for the domestication of the SDGs through the national development plans and the flagship programs as examples of strategies to leave no one behind. The initiative to increase and improve domestic revenue to finance development as envisaged in Ghana Beyond Aid is visionary. However, these strategies and plans will not drive the transformation that is required to achieve the SDGs by 2030 if they are not backed by a sustainable budget that is decentralized and responds to addressing the growing inequalities that persist between urban and rural and inter and intra-regions of the country. Government plans must also be backed by a regional and district workforce that understands the SDGs and can translate them into district development plans and be able to monitor same. We appreciate the government's acknowledgement of SDGs implementation challenges. Access to education has improved. However, the quality and infrastructure, including water, sanitation, and hygiene, is still a challenge. Technical and vocational education is being revamped, yet institutions are not adequately resourced to provide relevant skills to the youth. Plans by government to cede management of some public schools to non-state actors under a public-private partnership agreement could widen inequalities and threaten the realization of the SDGs 4 targets. Now, the private sector is profit-driven, and their engagement in the SDGs may not necessarily be people-centered. What practical measures?
I thank the distinguished representative of the Women's Major Group for her intervention. I now give the floor to the representative of the NGO Major Group.
Madam President, we acknowledge the government's effort to promote women's rights and gender equality, but we also register the slow pace of progress in all sectors, ranging from women's low participation in governance, access to resources critical to livelihoods, and the unacceptable high rate of violations of the rights of women and girls. This reality exists despite the passage of several policies and laws directed at addressing women's human rights. SDG 5, C1, measures countries' progress towards efforts being put in place to promote equality and the empowerment of women and girls. By tracking resource allocations and making them public, government commits to higher levels of transparency and accountability in budgets. Ad hoc interventions which do not seek to tackle systemic barriers should be removed. Government should ensure that there is adequate and effective financing to achieve gender equality and empowerment, and put transparent systems in place to track public resource allocations for gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment. The Ghana VNR reports indicates the establishment of the Gender, Children and Social Protection Ministry as one of its strategies to address gender inequalities. Yet, the ministry has 3 mandates and is under-resourced with the least government budget allocation. What sustainable systems will the government then put in place to ensure adequate financing and public tracking for resource allocations for the SDGs? And secondly, while CSO engagement is evident in all that is happening, could the government tell us what processes they will use to broaden civil society participation beyond SDG and VNR reporting? Thank you.
I thank the distinguished representative of the NGO group. I realize that more delegations have asked for the floor. I apologize due to the time constraints. We can no longer accommodate you. I now invite the Minister for Planning of Ghana to briefly respond to the interventions from the floor. You have about 3 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, let me begin with Norway. The delegate from Norway, we are very grateful for the question that you've asked, and in fact for all those who asked the various questions from Germany, from Cameroon, from Denmark, from the Women's Media Group, the NGOs, and indeed all of the members here. With regard to the opportunities at the grassroots, you know, we have, as one of our flagship projects is the Free Senior High School. In fact, it goes down to the grassroots of the country because, you know, in the past, I'm from a village, you know, and I was passed, my sister was passed over for me to go to school because we could not afford in my village. So indeed, if this free high school initiative is going to help people at the grassroots of the country, and so we have a lot of such interventions. You know, we are trying to do what we call the industrialization that is actually decentralized. So we have one district, one factory. Factories moving away from Accra, the capital, and from Tema, the industrial hub, going back to the districts. And these are the ways that we're trying to help give opportunities to the people at the grassroots. In terms of disaggregated data from Germany, yes, what we're trying to do now, you know, currently we want to find a way to really increase the data points that we have in terms of looking at our statistics. We have intensified our efforts to strengthen the use and use data from multiple sources, including from civil society, academia, and the private sector. We have also, for the first time in 30 years, conducted an agricultural census and currently working towards a 2020 population and housing census to reach out every corner and every economic activity in the country. We are also deepening the engagement with non-traditional data sources, specifically administrative data. We are also looking at Earth observation, that is satellite imagery data that is actually used to observe what is going on in our forests. And we are also using anonymized core detail records and citizen-generated data. Indeed, there is a limitation to what we are doing in terms of technical expertise, and that is what probably we need in order to integrate these spatial data with conventional data. That is the major concern that we have at this point. In the question about how we are going to, increase our revenue without necessarily relying on ODA. Yes, we think that, technology, we need technology to enhance our tax collection. And indeed, what we've done is that now we have a paperless port where we don't have human intervention in the process, and that actually speeds up, the process in terms of trade facilitation, and also that increases the volumes and also reduce graft and enhance revenue. So these are the two things that we are trying to do in that direction. I think I also had a question from Cameroon about gender equality. Indeed, in Ghana currently we have parity at the primary, at the basic level. That's the primary level. We have parity there. At the kindergarten level, we have parity there, and then at the senior secondary school levels, it's almost about 0.97, very close to parity. So yes, we are actually getting to remove the gender disparities. But of course, when you go to the rural communities where resources are very limited, you can still see some pockets of disparity between men and women. But of course, the free SHS, as I explained earlier on, is also helping that, because as at now, because of the fact that a man is not to be taken over by taking over the system because of resource availability. I think that would help to increase the gender gap. But, Madam Chair, at this point, I think my time is up, and therefore we will try and do the interactive things as we move out of here. Thank you so very much for listening.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the Voluntary National Review of Ghana. I thank the Minister of Planning of Ghana and his delegation for their presentation. And I also thank delegations in the room for their interventions. I now briefly pause the meeting to allow the podium to be rearranged.